This story is titled, When My Parents Abandoned Me at the Departure Gate, Having Secretly Refunded My Plane Ticket to Fly Without Me, I Executed Instant Revenge, canceling all their resort bookings and cutting financial ties. Just 10 minutes after their landing, my phone blew up with 17 missed calls from them. I've never shared this story online before, but I need to get this off my chest. Fair warning, this is going to be a long post because there's a lot to unpack about how I ended up completely cutting off my family 5 years ago. Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be the guy who would completely cut ties with his entire family. Growing up, I always valued family connections and believed that blood was thicker than water. But after what happened 5 years ago, I simply didn't have a choice anymore. Let me introduce the key players in this drama. There's my sister Nicole, who's 28 and has always been the golden child in our family. She had perfect grades throughout school, landed a perfect job right after college, married a perfect husband, and basically could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I'm just Nathan, the 31-year-old son who apparently couldn't do anything right despite working my ass off every single day. I remember when I got my first real job out of college. It wasn't anything particularly fancy, just a project manager position at a manufacturing company, but it offered solid pay with good prospects for advancement. I was actually proud of myself for landing it after months of applications and interviews. When I excitedly told my parents, Robert, 57, and Karen, 55, about it, my dad's only response was, "About time you started pulling your weight." No congratulations, no pride, nothing positive at all. In stark contrast, when Nicole landed her marketing job right out of school, my parents threw her an extravagant party and bought her a brand new laptop as a congratulatory gift. I didn't even receive a simple congratulatory text message for my achievement. This kind of blatant favoritism wasn't isolated. It was the story of my entire life. I made varsity baseball in high school, which was a big deal for me, but my dad skipped nearly all my games to attend Nicole's debate tournaments instead. When I became the first person in our family to earn a college degree, my parents complained endlessly about having to sit through my graduation ceremony. For Nicole's graduation just 2 years later, they rented an entire restaurant for her celebration party. Despite all this unfair treatment, I still helped my parents whenever they needed it. When my dad decided to take early retirement at 56, claiming it was necessary due to his back problems, which somehow never prevented him from playing golf 3 times a week, their finances quickly deteriorated. They called me in a panic, afraid they might lose their house. I quietly set up an arrangement through my financial advisor to cover $800 of their monthly mortgage payment. They believed the bank was simply working with them on a special payment plan. They had no idea it was actually me paying a substantial portion of their mortgage every month. Then there was my sister's situation. Her husband Marcus is this arrogant stockbroker type who has always treated me like I'm some sort of loser just because I work with my hands occasionally. Despite his high-paying job, it turned out that Mr. Stockbroker had absolutely terrible credit. He and Nicole begged me to co-sign for their Land Rover SUV, and like a fool, I agreed. Guess what happened next? They forgot to make payments about every 3 months, and I ended up covering them so my own credit score wouldn't tank. They didn't even know I was aware of these missed payments since the bank contacted me directly as the co-signer. The biggest expense, though, was my parents' health insurance. My dad's retirement package came with terrible coverage, so I added them as dependents on my premium plan at work, claiming they lived with me part-time. That cost me an extra $650 every month straight out of my pocket for years, and they had absolutely no clue about it. But the real breaking point came during my grandfather's final days. He was battling cancer, and I was the one visiting him every day after work. Nicole was supposedly too busy with her new job and only managed to show up maybe once a week, if that. When my grandfather passed away, he left me his classic '69 Corvette in his will. We had worked on restoring that car together for years. It was the one thing I truly cared about, and he knew exactly how much it meant to me. My family absolutely lost it when they heard about the inheritance. My dad literally screamed that the car should go to Nicole since she was always his favorite. This was complete bullshit. Nicole had barely spent any time with our grandfather. My mom kept insisting that Nicole needed it more, despite the fact that she was already driving that brand new Land Rover that her husband had bought her, or rather, that I was helping pay for without their knowledge. I told them all to pound sand. The car was mine. End of story. That's when things got really nasty. 2 days after the funeral, I caught my dad messing with the Corvette's brakes while it was parked at their house. He wasn't adjusting them or doing routine maintenance. He was deliberately loosening the brake line. I confronted him right there in the driveway, and he just shrugged it off, claiming he was just checking the brake fluid, and that I was being dramatic as usual. I didn't trust him for a second, so I immediately took the car straight to my buddy's shop. The mechanic confirmed someone had deliberately loosened the brake line, enough that it would have catastrophically failed once I got on the highway. Let that sink in for a moment. They tried to fucking kill me over a car. My own parents and sister were willing to risk my life because they were angry about an inheritance. That was it. That was the final straw that broke everything. I packed my belongings that night, got in the Corvette, and drove 700 miles to Minneapolis. I changed my phone number, blocked them all on social media, didn't leave a forwarding address, nothing. I just completely ghosted my entire toxic family. The crazy part? Even after all that, I still kept paying their mortgage and health insurance. Call it guilt or whatever you want, but I couldn't stomach the thought of them losing their house or not having medical coverage if something happened. I just made absolutely sure they had no idea the money was coming from me. For 3 years, I had total peace. I built myself a decent life in Minneapolis, got promoted twice at the manufacturing company I joined, and even started dating a great girl named Julia, who's 29 and works as a veterinarian. The only family member I kept in touch with was my cousin Ryan, who's 30 and always saw through my family's manipulative bullshit. He actually moved to Minneapolis a year after I did, partly to get away from all the drama too. Life was good. Finally drama-free. Then last Christmas, Ryan started talking about my parents. He mentioned they had been asking about me and seemed different now. According to him, they really missed me. He explained that my dad had experienced some health scare, nothing serious, just high blood pressure. But it had apparently made him reevaluate his priorities, or at least that's what Ryan had been told. I wasn't buying it at first and told Ryan they could all go to hell for all I cared. But he kept bringing it up over the following weeks, saying that maybe people can change, and that maybe they had finally realized what they had lost when I cut them off. After a few weeks of this persistent encouragement, I started thinking that maybe I should at least hear them out. What was the worst that could happen, right? So after New Year's, I unblocked their numbers and sent a simple text to the family group chat that just said, "Hey, it's Nathan." That's all I wrote. Holy shit, you would have thought I'd announced I'd won the lottery or something. My phone absolutely blew up with calls and texts. My mom was crying in her voicemails. My dad kept saying how much they had missed me, and Nicole was suddenly acting like we were best friends who had just lost touch for a while. They even sent gift baskets to my apartment. Ryan must have given them my address and offered to fly me out to visit them. They pulled out all the stops. I kept things casual at first. Brief calls every couple of weeks with just basic updates about my life, though I was careful not to share too much. They actually seemed different this time around. My dad didn't make any of his usual smart-ass comments. My mom actually asked questions about my job instead of immediately changing the subject to talk about Nicole, and even Nicole herself seemed less self-centered, asking about Julia and showing what appeared to be genuine interest in my life. Things really picked up momentum when they started talking about planning a big family vacation to Japan for New Year's. Our treat, my dad kept saying, insisting it was to make up for lost time. I was skeptical at first, but after months of this new, improved family relationship, I actually started to believe they might have genuinely changed. Maybe the time apart had shown them what they had lost. Maybe that health scare really did change my dad's perspective on life and family. So after months of reconnecting with my family through calls and texts, the big Japan vacation was finally about to happen. We had been texting regularly about the trip details, and my dad kept emphasizing that this was his grand gesture to welcome me back to the family. They had planned an elaborate 14-day trip to Japan over New Year's Tokyo, Kyoto, Hot Springs, the works. It sounded amazing. I was still somewhat cautious, but I figured I'd give them this chance to prove things were different now. I even took 2 full weeks off work, which was a huge deal considering we had a major project scheduled to start in January. My boss wasn't happy about my timing, but I convinced him that this family reconnection was important to me. Julia couldn't come because of emergency vet clinic shifts she couldn't get covered, but she was incredibly supportive of me trying to rebuild my relationship with my family. She even helped me pack and drove me to the airport the morning of the flight. So there I was, standing in line at Minneapolis International Airport with my passport and the printed confirmation email my dad had sent me a week earlier. I'd spent around $800 on new luggage, winter clothes appropriate for Japan in January, and other things I needed for the trip. Despite my lingering doubts, I was actually getting excited about the possibility that this really might be a new beginning for our family relationship. When I finally reached the counter, the airline attendant started typing my information into her computer. Then she frowned and typed some more, looking increasingly confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but your ticket has been canceled," she told me. I figured it was just some kind of mix-up that could be easily fixed. "Can you check again? It's a family reservation under Robert Walsh," I explained. She kept typing and checking her system. "Yes, I see the family reservation for the Tokyo flight," she confirmed. "But your specific ticket was canceled yesterday afternoon. The rest of the party is already checked in and boarded." My stomach dropped like a stone. I stepped to the side of the line and immediately called Nicole, since she was the one who had been handling all the flight details. "Hey, there's some issue with my ticket. They're saying it was canceled," I said when she answered. There was this little laugh on the other end of the line before she responded. "Oh, Nathan, did you really think we wanted you there? This was Mom and Dad's idea, to see if you'd actually show up. Guess what? You failed the test." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What the fuck are you talking about? You abandoned this family for years," she continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can just waltz back in because you feel like it? Mom and Dad might be desperate enough to forgive you, but Marcus and I aren't. We opened their eyes to the fact that you were just using them again." "So you all planned this?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Get me to the airport just to cancel my ticket?" "Actually," Nicole said, sounding disgustingly smug, "that was Marcus's idea. We were all just going to ghost you, but he thought this would be more memorable. Have fun spending New Year's alone, loser." Then she hung up. Just like that, I was standing in the middle of a crowded airport, surrounded by happy families excited about their vacations, feeling like the biggest idiot in the world. I tried calling both my parents, but neither of them answered. I sent them multiple texts, but got nothing in response. After everything I'd done to give them another chance, after all the "we miss you" and "we want to make things right" bullshit, this is what I got. A deliberate setup just to humiliate me in public. Finally, about an hour later, I received a text from my dad. "Nicole told us what happened. Maybe this is for the best. We'll talk when we get back." Not even a fucking apology. Just, Nicole told us what happened. Like I was somehow the problem. Like I had somehow caused this whole situation. I was so mad I couldn't see straight. I called Julia, sounding completely frustrated and defeated. When she heard what had happened, she immediately drove back to get me from the airport. She was absolutely livid. I've never seen her that angry before. She wanted to call them and scream at them for what they'd done, but I told her it wouldn't help anything. They clearly didn't care about my feelings. The Uber ride back to my apartment, before Julia could pick me up, was just me sitting there in shock trying to process what had happened. 3 hours earlier, I'd been excited about reconnecting with my family on this dream vacation to Japan. Now I was heading home alone, completely humiliated. With 2 weeks of vacation time I didn't even want to take anymore. That night, while looking through all the texts and emails about the trip, something finally clicked. Why had they been so interested in my job and finances over the past few months? Why did my mom accidentally open my bank statement when I had mail forwarded to their house? Why did my dad keep bringing up that I should add them to my accounts in case of emergency? It suddenly hit me. They hadn't changed at all. They just wanted access to my money again. The whole Japan trip was just a way to fully pull me back into their web of manipulation and control. They never gave a fuck about actually reconnecting with me as a person. What they didn't know was how well I'd done for myself since cutting them off. I'd moved up to senior project manager, invested smartly, and built a solid financial portfolio. Meanwhile, from what Ryan had told me, my parents were struggling since my dad took early retirement, and Nicole's husband Marcus had lost a bunch of money on some stupid cryptocurrency scheme. They didn't want me back in their lives. They wanted what I could do for them financially. It was the same old pattern, just with a new angle. I sat in my apartment that night, watching my phone blow up with messages from Nicole, all saying things like, "It was just a joke," and "Don't be so sensitive," and "We were going to book you on the next flight," and "Can't you take a joke?" My parents still hadn't directly messaged me, cowards hiding behind Nicole as usual. That's when I made my final decision. I texted my cousin Ryan. "You were wrong about them changing. They just pulled the cruelest prank ever. I'm done for good this time." He called me immediately. "What happened?" After I explained everything, he was silent for a moment before responding. Those fucking assholes. I swear I didn't know, Nathan. I really thought they'd changed. I believe you, I assured him. But now I need your help with something. Ryan didn't hesitate for a second. Whatever you need, bro. I needed to know exactly what financial ties I still had with them. It was time to dismantle everything. I'd been their financial safety net for too long without them even knowing it. It was time to let them feel what life was like without me footing their bills. I started with the mortgage payments. I called my financial advisor the next morning and told him to halt all transfers immediately. You sure about this, Nathan? He asked. They're 3 months from foreclosure without your support. I was absolutely sure. The bank would send them a formal letter about their special payment arrangement ending, and they could figure out how to cover the full amount themselves. Next was Nicole's Land Rover. One call to the bank and I explained that I wanted my name completely off the loan. The lady on the phone hesitated. Sir, without your credit score backing this loan, they'll need to refinance at nearly double the current interest rate. That was music to my ears. That's fine, I said. Also, please note that I'm withdrawing permission for any payment extensions. No more covering for their conveniently forgotten payments. The health insurance situation was trickier to resolve, but HR helped me remove them during what they called a life change event. I simply explained that we had a falling out, and they no longer lived with me part-time. My HR representative actually seemed relieved. She'd always thought it was weird that I was covering for my parents when most people my age were still on their parents' insurance, not the other way around. I also went through all my accounts and canceled all the smaller stuff they'd been benefiting from. I removed them from my Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Spotify accounts. I changed all my passwords to everything. I even canceled the Costco membership I'd been paying for that my mom loved to brag about to her friends. We get such good deals, she'd say, never once acknowledging who was actually paying for it. I didn't stop there. I even called the fancy ryokan, traditional Japanese inn, in Kyoto where they were staying and canceled the second week of their reservation, the part I'd paid for as a reconnection gift before all this happened. They'd find themselves without accommodations halfway through their trip. When the booking agent asked if I wanted a refund, I replied, absolutely. Why should I pay for people who treated me like garbage? Ryan called me the next day with some unexpected news. Holy shit, Nathan! Did you close the joint investment account too? What joint investment account? I asked, completely confused. Ryan went quiet for a second. You don't know about this? Your dad's been bragging to my dad about how you two have this investment account together. Said it was your way of making amends for leaving. I nearly dropped my phone in shock. I had set up an investment account right after college that had done pretty well, about $23,000 last I checked. But I'd forgotten about it during the chaos of moving and cutting ties with my family. The statements must have still been going to my old address. I was at the bank within the hour. Sure enough, my parents had somehow added their names to the account. The bank manager looked visibly uncomfortable as she pulled up the documents. It appears your father became a joint owner last year, she explained. Do you recall authorizing this? Absolutely not, I stated firmly. She slid the signature authorization form towards me. The signature looked like mine, but I hadn't signed anything like this. Ever. This is forgery, I said flatly. That pushed me to file fraud reports, which would trigger an official investigation. Let them explain that when they got back from their fancy vacation that I was supposed to be on. By the time I was done, I'd reclaimed over $1,500 in monthly expenses I'd been paying for people who clearly didn't give a fuck about me, plus the $23,000 they'd tried to steal through forgery. The financial burden I'd been carrying for years was finally gone. I felt lighter, like I'd cut the last invisible strings they had attached to me, but I also knew the shitstorm that was coming. They wouldn't take this lying down. Sure enough, about a week later, halfway through their trip, the messages started pouring in. First came one from Nicole. What the fuck did you do? The hotel says our reservation for next week is canceled. I didn't bother responding. Then my dad, there's some issue with our health insurance. The pharmacy says we're not covered anymore. Is this your doing? As if he couldn't figure it out. My only response was to send a single group text. Hope you enjoyed your family vacation without me. Consider this my final goodbye. Don't contact me again. I blocked their numbers before they could respond. That night, Ryan called me with an update. They're coming home early. The hotel thing really screwed them, and Nicole's freaking out about the car payment. Apparently, the bank wants an extra $900 a month now. Not my problem, I said simply. No, it's definitely not, Ryan agreed. But you should know they're pissed. Like nuclear pissed. My mom said your dad was ranting about making you pay. What's he going to do? Loosen my brake lines again? I laughed, but it wasn't really funny given their history. Just be careful, man, Ryan warned. They might show up at your place when they get back. Ryan was right. I needed to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. I installed a Ring doorbell camera and 2 additional security cameras covering my parking spot and the back entrance to my apartment building. I made copies of all the financial records showing my support over the years, just in case they tried to spin some bullshit story to the extended family. I told my building security about the situation, so they wouldn't let my family up without calling me first. I even warned Julia so she wouldn't accidentally let them in if she was at my place when they showed up. They'd spent years making me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I should be grateful for any scraps of attention or approval they threw my way. Now, they were about to learn what it felt like to be cut off completely. And you know what? It felt fucking good. 3 days later, I got a notification from my Ring camera that someone was at my door. I checked the app, and there they were. My parents, Nicole, and Marcus, all looking pissed off and jet-lagged, standing in my apartment hallway. I wasn't planning to open the door at first, but then I figured, why not face them? I'm not scared of these people anymore. So I let them in. My mom started right away with her accusations. Nathan, what is going on? First the hotel reservation, then the health insurance. Now the bank says our mortgage arrangement is canceled. Is this some kind of sick revenge? I just laughed. No, this is just me stopping the financial support you never knew about or appreciated. Seems fair since you guys clearly don't want me in the family anyway. My dad's face turned this weird shade of purple. What are you talking about? We've never taken a dime from you. That's when I pulled out the folder with all the receipts, literally. Bank statements showing my mortgage contributions, health insurance documents with them listed as my dependents, car payment records for Nicole's Land Rover. Everything. For 5 years, I've been quietly helping all of you, I told them. Even after you tried to kill me over Grandpa's car. And how do you repay me? By setting me up for humiliation at the airport. They all started talking at once. My dad denying everything. My mom crying about how they needed that financial help. Nicole claiming the airport thing was just a joke that went too far. Marcus, the absolute asshole, had the nerve to say, "Look, we didn't know you were helping with the bills. That's on you for not telling us. And the airport thing was just to teach you a lesson about abandoning family." Abandoning family? I got right in his face. I left because they tampered with my brakes and could have killed me. That's ancient history, my mom tried to say. We've all grown since then. Really? Because from where I'm standing, you're the same selfish, manipulative people you've always been. The only difference is I'm not your ATM anymore. Nicole started crying, saying they were going to lose the house. Her car was going to be repossessed, and it was all my fault. Classic Nicole, always the victim. Not my problem, I told her. Maybe Marcus shouldn't have blown your savings on crypto if he's such a financial genius. Marcus lunged at me then, but my dad held him back. Not out of concern for me, I'm sure, but because he knew I'd press charges in a heartbeat if Marcus laid a hand on me. We're family, my dad tried one last time. You can't just cut us off like this. Actually, I can and I have, I replied coldly. You're not my family anymore. You're just people I used to know who treated me like shit. Now get out before I call the cops. They left, but not before Nicole tried one last guilt trip. You'll regret this when you have no one. I'd rather have no one than have you, I told her as I closed the door. After they left, I felt this weird sense of peace, like I'd finally closed a chapter that should have ended years ago. Ryan called later that night with news from the family grapevine. Apparently, my parents and Nicole had been calling everyone in the extended family, spinning some sob story about how I was financially abusing them. Most people weren't buying it, especially after Ryan shared what really happened at the airport. The best part was that my Aunt Carol, who's always been close to my mom, actually took my side. She told my mom, "If you treat your son like that, what did you expect? Actions have consequences, Karen." That gave me a weird sense of validation, like maybe I wasn't crazy for cutting them off after all. With that in mind, I was starting to settle into the idea of moving on, keeping my distance, and focusing on my own life. But just when I thought the dust had finally settled, life threw another curve. About a month after the Japan disaster, I was grabbing coffee before work last Thursday when my phone rang. It was my Uncle Peter, my dad's brother, who I'd always gotten along with pretty well before all the family drama. "Nathan, got a minute to talk?" he asked. I hesitated, wondering if this was another family member trying to guilt me into making up with my parents. "What's up, Peter? Ryan told me what happened, the airport thing. That was some seriously messed up shit they pulled on you." I was surprised by his sympathetic tone. Yeah, it was. Listen, I know you probably don't want anything to do with the family right now, but I need to tell you something. Your dad's been spreading all kinds of crap about you, saying you had a mental breakdown and cut them off for no reason. That sounded exactly like my dad, always playing the victim. But I know the truth, Peter continued. Your dad's always been jealous of you. You know you remind him too much of your grandfather, who never thought Robert was good enough. What are you talking about? I asked, confused by this new information. Why do you think your grandfather left you the Corvette? He saw himself in you, not in your dad. Robert's never forgiven either of you for that. The pieces were finally coming together. The favoritism toward Nicole wasn't just random. It was my dad's way of getting back at his own father through me. And my mom had gone along with it because she always followed Dad's lead. Your grandpa used to tell me how proud he was of you, Peter continued. Said you had real grit, unlike your dad who always took the easy way out. We talked for almost an hour, with Peter filling in gaps about family history I never knew. By the end of the call, he hit me with a proposition: payback. Since my Japan trip had been ruined, Peter suggested we actually go, just without the family drama. He wanted to organize a trip for me, him, Ryan, and Ryan's son Chris, using his airline miles from work. But the best part? He wanted to invite my parents and Nicole too, except we'd book their flights from a completely different airport, 5 hours away from where they lived. Let them experience a taste of their own medicine. The idea was so perfectly petty I couldn't help but laugh. Over the next few weeks, Peter worked his magic. He called my parents and Nicole, telling them he wanted to heal the family divide with a trip to Hawaii. They'd have to drive to Chicago for their flight, even though we lived near Minneapolis. But Peter sold it as the only way to get direct flights with his miles. Meanwhile, we booked our own flights from Minneapolis, scheduled to leave 2 days before theirs. The day of their flight, Peter sent me a screenshot of a text from my dad. Traffic is horrible. Might miss the flight. Can you call the airline? That's when I sent Nicole a simple message. Have a nice trip home, losers. I had to unblock them all just to send it, but it was worth it. We spent an amazing week in Hawaii. I posted exactly one photo online, the 4 of us at a luau with the caption, "Best family vacation ever." The likes and comments came flooding in from everyone except my parents and Nicole. My buddy Chris texted me, "Dude, your sister is pissed about that Hawaii pic. She was at the bar last night ranting about it." Good. Let her be pissed. I was too busy enjoying paradise with people who actually gave a fuck about me. The Hawaii trip was exactly what I needed, a chance to actually enjoy myself without walking on eggshells around toxic family members. We got back to Minneapolis feeling refreshed, and I was ready to move on with my life. But that feeling lasted about 12 hours. I woke up the next morning and headed out to my car to go to work. What I found in the parking lot made my blood run cold. My car, not just any car, but my grandfather's Corvette that he'd left me, was sitting there completely destroyed. All 4 tires had been slashed, every single window was smashed in, and spray painted across the side in bright red letters were the words, "You shouldn't have messed with our property." For a second, I couldn't breathe. This car was the one thing I had from my grandfather, the only family member who'd ever truly been on my side. We'd spent hundreds of hours restoring it together before he died. And now, I called the police immediately. While waiting for them to arrive, I remembered the security cameras I'd installed after Ryan warned me they might try something. I quickly pulled up the app on my phone, and there it was. Crystal clear footage from 3 a.m. showing my parents and Nicole's husband Marcus taking turns vandalizing my car. The video showed everything in perfect detail. My dad slashing the tires while my mom nervously kept watch, Marcus smashing the windows with a baseball bat, and Nicole spraying the message on the side and even taking a selfie next to her handiwork when she was done. I was in shock for most of the day. Peter came over that night after I called him. He watched the security footage and turned red with anger. "Those stupid vindictive fuckers," he muttered. "Robert's always had a temper, but this is criminal." "Literally," I said. "The cops said they're looking at felony charges." Peter shook his head. "Good. Maybe they'll finally learn actions have consequences." Not only did I file a police report, but Peter talked me into sending the security footage to the local news in my parents' town. His exact words were, "They love playing the upstanding citizen act. Let's see how they like it when everyone sees the real them." And boy, did the news station eat it up. Their lead story was literally, "Prominent local couple arrested for vandalizing son's car after family dispute." They ran the footage on the evening news, so by the next morning, Everyone in their small-town social circle had seen my oh-so-respectable, church-going parents going full Grand Theft Auto on my car. But the best part? They got arrested at their country club during Sunday brunch, in front of all their fancy friends. According to Peter, who heard it from his golf buddy who was there, people had their phones out recording the whole thing. So yeah, actions meet consequences indeed. The charges against them were serious: felony vandalism, criminal mischief, and because they'd crossed state lines to commit the crime, federal charges were being considered as well. Marcus got the worst of it since he was already on probation for a DUI last year, so this violated the terms of his probation. He was held without bail, while my parents managed to post bond. Nicole called me sobbing the day after they were arrested. "How could you do this to us?" she wailed, like somehow I was the bad guy for having security cameras and reporting a crime. "Me? You destroyed Grandpa's car, Nicole," I responded. "The car you guys already tried to kill me over once before." "It was Marcus's idea," she insisted. "He was drunk and angry about the Hawaii thing. Mom and Dad just went along because they were upset." "Well, now you're all going to face the consequences," I said, and hung up. Sometimes I think that's the moment when I truly, finally cut the emotional cord with my family. Not when I drove away 5 years ago, not when they left me at the airport, but when they deliberately destroyed the one thing they knew meant the world to me, and all because I stopped being their personal ATM. The criminal charges forced my parents and Nicole's husband to hire expensive lawyers, draining what little savings they had left after I cut off my financial support. Without my help covering their mortgage and other bills, things spiraled quickly for them. Their mortgage payments fell behind, credit card companies started calling, and their precious country club membership was revoked due to unpaid dues. And the whole getting arrested on the property thing. Meanwhile, I filed an insurance claim for the car, but it wasn't just about the money. That car was irreplaceable, and they knew it. That's exactly why they targeted it. Within 6 months, my parents had to put their house on the market. The same house they'd bragged about at every family gathering, with its designer kitchen and newly renovated master bath that I'd helped pay for. They ended up in a small ranch house on the other side of town, in the area they used to make fun of as not suitable for our kind of people. On top of that, my mom had to sell her prized antique collection to cover their legal fees. Each piece she'd spent years collecting and refused to let anyone touch, now sold for pennies on the dollar at some rushed estate sale. My dad had to come out of retirement to work as a security guard at the same mall where he used to shop for his designer suits. My mom, who'd never worked a day in her life, started selling MLM products on Facebook, desperately trying to maintain the appearance that they still had money. Even Nicole and Marcus's marriage didn't survive. He ended up serving 6 months for the vandalism since it violated his probation. When he got out, Nicole told him she wanted a divorce. According to Peter, Marcus had gambled away most of their savings anyway, so their fancy lifestyle was already crumbling before the car incident. The family completely fractured after all this. Most relatives took my side, especially after the vandalism thing. Even some who had initially stayed neutral couldn't defend what they'd done after seeing the security footage. Uncle Peter became something of a surrogate father to me, calling weekly to check in and inviting me to family events where my parents weren't welcome. Ryan and I grew even closer, and his parents, my aunt and uncle on my mom's side, stopped talking to my mom altogether. About a year after the car incident, I got an envelope in the mail with no return address, but I recognized my mom's handwriting immediately. Inside was a 5-page handwritten letter about how sorry they were, how they'd learned their lesson, and how much they missed their son. There was a lot of religious stuff about forgiveness and family being forever. I returned it unopened with "Return to sender, address unknown" written across it. Some bridges, once they're burned, should stay burned. Peter called me a few days later. "Your mom's telling everyone you refused to even read her apology letter?" "Yep," I confirmed. "Good for you," he replied. "That letter wasn't an apology anyway. Your dad was bragging at my poker game that they were going to make things right and get you to help them financially again. That was the final confirmation I needed that I'd made the right choice. They hadn't changed at all. They just wanted their ATM back. These days, I'm doing better than ever. All the money I used to waste supporting them now goes into my own investments and travel fund. Julia moved in with me last month, and we're talking about getting married next year. My car insurance paid out for the Corvette, and while I couldn't replace Grandpa's original car, I found another '69 model that I'm slowly restoring. It's not the same, but there's something therapeutic about working on it, like I'm honoring his memory in a new way. I still get updates about my parents occasionally through the family grapevine. They've apparently found a church that's big on family reconciliation and keep telling people I'm going through a phase. Nicole moved to Chicago after her divorce and barely speaks to them anymore. Sometimes my mother still tries to reach out through mutual acquaintances, usually when she needs money. I always send back the same message. Have a nice trip home, losers. Petty, probably, but it reminds me how far I've come and how much better life is without toxic people, even if they're family. The hardest part of all this wasn't finding out my parents could be such terrible people. It was accepting that I deserved better treatment from them all along. Now I have better people in my life, and I'm never looking back. When I think about everything that happened, from the years of favoritism toward Nicole, to the airport humiliation, to the destruction of my grandfather's car, I realize that cutting them off was the healthiest decision I ever made. The peace I've found since drawing that firm boundary has been life-changing. Julia has been amazing through all of this. She's helped me understand that family isn't just about blood. It's about people who genuinely care about you and want what's best for you. My chosen family of Julia, Ryan, Uncle Peter, and a few close friends gives me all the support and love I need. I sometimes wonder if my parents ever truly reflect on what they did and how they lost their son. Not just because of one incident, but because of a lifetime of neglect, favoritism, and manipulation. Part of me hopes they've learned something from all this, not for my sake, but for their own. Living with so much bitterness and resentment can't be good for anyone. As for me, I'm focusing on building a positive future rather than dwelling on the painful past. Julia and I are planning our next vacation, Norway this time, to see the Northern Lights. Uncle Peter and Ryan's family might join us. No fake invitations, no cruel pranks, no manipulation, just genuine people enjoying each other's company. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that being related to someone doesn't give them the right to treat you poorly. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and even for them, is to walk away and let them face the consequences of their actions. So that's my story. From being abandoned at the airport to finally finding peace by leaving toxic family behind. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of painful moments along the way, but I'm in a much better place now. And that's what matters in the end.